I trusted my stepdad for years, until my brakes failed on the highway. It wasn't an accident. Someone wanted me dead because my father left something behind, and only one man was desperate enough to kill for it. My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 31 years old. Most people in my hometown in Indiana would describe my family as quiet and respectable, the kind of family that waves at neighbors, shows up to church, and never ends up in the police blotter. That image died the night I almost did. But to understand why my stepfather wanted me gone, you need to know what happened after my real dad passed away. My father, Michael Carter, died when I was 16. The doctors called it a heart attack. Quick, clean, tragic. I remember the funeral like it was filmed through fog. My mom's face looked hollow, like grief had carved something out of her that would never grow back. And me, I couldn't even cry. I just stood there and watched the casket lower, feeling like the world had been robbed of gravity. That's when Richard Hayes stepped in. Richard was my dad's friend. He used to show up at our house sometimes with coffee and loud jokes, always acting like he owned the air in the room. After Dad died, Richard became the guy everyone praised. He's helping your poor mother. What a blessing. Your dad would want this. Within 11 months, Richard married my mom. 11 months. I tried to convince myself it was love, that mom was lonely, scared, and needed support. But every time Richard hugged her, it felt less like comfort and more like possession. At first, he was careful around me. He played the role of the friendly stepdad when people were watching. He asked about school, bought me new sneakers, patted my shoulder like we were buddies. But behind closed doors, his voice sharpened. One night, I came home late for basketball practice. Richard was sitting at our kitchen table with my dad's old laptop open. Dad's laptop, the one Mom said she couldn't touch because it still smelled like him. Richard didn't even look up. He just said, "You're late." "We had practice," I answered. He clicked something on the screen and smiled slightly. "Discipline matters, Ethan. I'm the man of this house now." I felt heat rise into my face. "My dad!" Richard snapped the laptop shut, slowly, like a threat. Then he leaned in and whispered, "Your dad is dead, and if you don't learn respect, life will teach you." That was the first time I realized Richard wasn't here to replace my father. He was here to erase him. After I turned 18, I got out. College, jobs, distance, anything to keep my life from becoming part of Richard's control. I still called Mom. I visited a few times a year, but Richard always acted like I was a guest in what used to be my home. Then last winter, Mom called me late on a Sunday night. Her voice sounded small, almost guilty. "Ethan, can you come home for a few days?" My stomach tightened. "What's wrong?" She hesitated. "Richard hasn't been well. His blood pressure. He's been stressed. I'm worried about him." I wanted to laugh. Richard Hayes didn't look like a man capable of weakness. He looked like the kind of guy who would survive an apocalypse just to be in charge of it. But my mother sounded scared, and I still loved her too much to ignore it. So I drove home. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same. Same porch light, same mailbox, same quiet street. But something about the air felt off, like the house was holding its breath. Mom opened the door immediately and hugged me too tight. "You're thinner," she whispered. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. That's when Richard appeared behind her, holding a glass of water like he'd been waiting to play the perfect husband. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Well, look who finally decided to show up." "Richard," I greeted, careful. His gaze dropped to my car keys, my jacket, my watch, like he was measuring my worth. Then he asked casually, "Chicago treating you good? You making real money out there?" I glanced at Mom. Her eyes darted away. At dinner, Richard kept poking at the same subject like a tooth he wanted to pull. My job, my salary, my savings, my future. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, my father's chair, and said, "Your dad would be proud. You turned out useful." Useful? That word made me feel like I wasn't a son. I was an asset. Later, when I helped Mom wash dishes, she leaned close and whispered, "Ethan, I found something in Richard's office." My chest tightened. What kind of something? Her hands trembled so badly a plate rattled. "I can't say it here." Before I could push further, Richard's voice boomed from the living room. "Evelyn." My mother flinched like she'd been slapped. That night, I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words again and again. I found something. Around 2 a.m., I heard soft footsteps downstairs, a door creaking, then a faint click, like a safe. I held my breath. And then I heard Richard's voice, low and dangerous, through the floor. "He's here," Richard murmured into the phone. "Don't worry, I'll handle it." A pause. Then the sentence that turned my blood to ice. "He can't walk away with what's his."
I didn't sleep after hearing Richard on the phone. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house breathe. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside, every tiny sound suddenly felt like a warning. At 6:40 a.m., I heard Mom in the kitchen. I walked in and found her standing by the sink, holding a mug of coffee with both hands like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Her eyes were puffy. "Mom," I said softly, "what did you find?" She flinched, then glanced toward the hallway like Richard might appear out of thin air. "I shouldn't have called you," she whispered. "That's not true." She shook her head. "You don't understand him like I do." I hated that sentence, the way it sounded like surrender. I lowered my voice. "Tell me anyway." Mom swallowed hard. "Last week, Richard asked me to bring him a folder from his office. It was on his desk. I went in, and I saw papers with your name on them." "My name?" "Yes," her voice cracked. "Not just your name, your father's too." My stomach tightened. "What kind of papers?" Mom hesitated, then whispered, "Something called the Carter Trust." I froze. "The what?" "I don't know," she said quickly. "I didn't even know it existed, but the papers had a bank logo, and there were numbers, big numbers, and Richard snatched it from me so fast, like I'd caught him hiding a weapon." A trust. My father left something behind. All those years, I believed we were just getting by, that Dad's business was small, that Mom married Richard for safety. If a trust existed, Richard hadn't married her for love. He'd married her for access. My hands curled into fists. "Do you know where he keeps it?" Mom's face went pale. "Ethan, please don't do anything. He's been acting strange, like he's scared." "Scared of what?" She looked down. "Of you." That afternoon, Richard cornered me in the garage while Mom was on a grocery run. He leaned against the workbench like he owned it, and maybe he thought he did. "You staying long?" he asked, too casual. "A few days," I said. "Why?" Richard nodded slowly. "Good. Family should stick together." Then he smiled, a thin smile. "I heard Chicago pays you well." I didn't answer. He stepped closer. "You got any debt? Student loans? Credit cards?" My jaw tightened. "Why do you care?" He raised both hands like he was harmless. "Just trying to help, Ethan. If something ever happened, I'd want to make sure you're taken care of." Something ever happened. Those words hit like a slap to the back of my head. I stared at him. "Like what?" Richard's eyes held mine for a long second. Too long. Then he chuckled. "Life's unpredictable. Cars break down. Accidents happen." My blood went cold. That night, I waited until the house fell quiet. I watched Richard from the hallway as he locked his office like he always did, twisting the key with a satisfied little motion, like he enjoyed keeping people out. Then he went upstairs. A few minutes later, Mom's bedroom door clicked shut. I moved silently down the hall and stood outside Richard's office. Locked. Of course. But I'd grown up in this house. I knew where my dad kept spare keys for everything, back when this place was still ours. I checked the old kitchen junk drawer. Still there. A ring of dusty keys that hadn't been touched in years. My hand shook as I tested them one by one. The third key turned. The lock clicked open. I stepped inside and gently closed the door behind me. The office smelled like leather, expensive cologne, and control. Richard had framed photos on the wall, him and Mom at events, him shaking hands with local politicians, him smiling like a man who never lost. I moved to the desk. A laptop, neat stacks of paperwork, a locked metal drawer on the side. I pulled it. Locked. Then I noticed something behind the desk, a small safe hidden under a hanging coat. I swallowed. That was the click I heard last night. I crouched and ran my fingers along the keypad. 4 digits. I tried the obvious first, Mom's birthday. Denied. Then Richard's. Denied. My heart pounded. I could hear it in my ears. Think, Ethan. Richard loved power, loved proving he owned us. Then it hit me. My father's death date. I typed it in. The safe beeped, and the door swung open. Inside was a folder labeled Carter Family Trust. My hands went numb as I pulled it out. Then I saw the number. $2,800,000. Not $28 million, but enough to change everything. Enough to make a man dangerous. I flipped through the pages. The trust was created by my father, the beneficiary was me, and the condition was clear. Full control transfers to Ethan Carter on his 31st birthday. My birthday had been last month, which meant Richard had been hiding it, stealing time, stealing money, stealing my father's final gift. I kept flipping, and that's when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A life insurance policy. My father's policy. And underneath, another form. A claim form. With a signature that looked like my mother's. But it wasn't her handwriting. It was forged. Then I heard it. A floorboard upstairs creak. My whole body locked up. Someone was awake, and they were moving toward the stairs.
I froze in Richard's office, holding that folder like it weighed 100 pounds. Upstairs, the floor creaked again. Slow footsteps. Not rushed, not sleepy. Controlled, like someone already knew what they were walking into. My hands shook as I flipped the folder shut and slid it back into the safe. Not because I wanted to cover for Richard, but because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If he caught me in here, he wouldn't just yell. He'd destroy me. I snapped quick photos with my phone, every page I could, the trust amount, the beneficiary section with my name, the line about control transferring on my 31st birthday, the insurance policy, the claim form with the forged signature. Click, click, click. Then I heard the office door handle move. My heart stopped. The knob turned once, twice. Locked. Richard had locked it earlier, which meant whoever was outside didn't have the key. A second later, a soft knock came through the wood. "Ethan?" My mom's voice. I exhaled like someone pulled a blade from my ribs. I walked to the door and cracked it open. Mom stood there in her robe, hair messy, eyes wide with fear. "What are you doing?" she whispered. "I needed proof," I whispered back. "It's real, Mom. The trust, it's real." Her lips parted like she couldn't breathe. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew something was wrong." Then her gaze flicked over my shoulder, to the safe, to the desk, to the whole room that screamed secrets. "We have to get out of here," she said urgently. "Right now." I stared at her. "What? Why?" Her voice dropped to almost nothing. "I heard him on the phone earlier. He thinks you're going to take it. He thinks—" A sound cut her off. The upstairs bedroom door opening. A heavier footstep. Richard's. Mom grabbed my arm so tight her nails dug into my skin. "Please," she whispered. "Please, Ethan." I didn't argue. I stepped out of the office, pulled the door shut, and locked it again. I shoved the key back into the junk drawer like nothing had happened. Then we both moved toward the kitchen, pretending it was normal, pretending we weren't seconds away from war. Richard walked into the hallway wearing sweatpants and a shirt like he'd been awake for hours. He smiled, but his eyes weren't smiling. They were scanning. Me, Mom, the hallway, the junk drawer, like he was counting items and checking what had changed. Couldn't sleep? He asked casually. Mom forced a laugh. I was getting water. Richard nodded slowly, then looked at me. And you? I shrugged. Jet lag, Chicago schedule. His gaze narrowed. Yeah, big city habits. He walked into the kitchen and opened the fridge like he belonged there. Then he poured himself orange juice and drank it slowly, never taking his eyes off me. That's when I realized something terrifying. Richard didn't need proof. He didn't need cameras. He didn't need to catch me in the office. He just needed to feel threatened. And right now, he did. Breakfast was quiet. Too quiet. Mom barely touched her food. I couldn't swallow. Richard talked like nothing was wrong. Local news, the weather, how the town council was full of idiots. Then he leaned back and said, "Ethan, I need you to do me a favor today." I stiffened. What kind of favor? I want you to drive over to my storage unit, pick up a box of paperwork, bring it back. He smiled. Easy. My stomach tightened. Why can't you go? Richard sighed dramatically. Doctor wants me resting. Stress, remember? He tapped his chest. I don't want your mother worried. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. I looked at her and saw pure panic in her eyes. Storage unit, paperwork, drive. He's sending me somewhere alone. I forced calm into my voice. Sure. Richard's smile widened. Good man. After breakfast, Mom followed me into the laundry room where Richard couldn't hear. Her voice trembled. Don't go. I stared at her. If I refuse, he'll know. Mom swallowed. He already knows. I pulled out my phone. I took photos. Everything. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Ethan, you don't understand. Richard, he's not just greedy. I know, I said softly. He's dangerous. Mom grabbed my hand. Promise me you'll be careful. I nodded. But inside, my chest felt like it was caving in. I walked out to my car, trying not to show fear. Richard stood on the porch watching me like a prison guard. He raised a hand. Drive safe, he called. I forced a smile back. Always. I got in, closed the door, and locked it. Then I sat there for a moment staring at the steering wheel. My father taught me to check oil, tires, brake fluid. He used to say, Ethan, a car tells you when something's wrong. You just have to listen. I started the engine. Everything sounded normal, but something in my gut screamed. I backed out slowly. As soon as I hit the street, I checked my mirrors again and again like someone might be behind me. I drove toward the storage unit on the edge of town. Halfway there, I stopped at a gas station and stepped out. I crouched by the front tire and looked underneath. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for, just anything suspicious. I didn't see anything. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe grief was making me see monsters. I got back in and pulled onto the highway. The speed climbed. 40, 55, 65. The road opened up, winter trees lining both sides like dark witnesses. Then, suddenly, the car in front of me slammed on their brakes. Instinct kicked in. I hit my brakes. Nothing happened. At first, I thought maybe I didn't press hard enough. I pressed again, harder. The pedal went soft under my foot like stepping on a sponge. No resistance, no slowing down. My eyes widened. No, no, no. The car ahead grew bigger in my windshield. I yanked the wheel to the left, swerving into the next lane. A horn exploded beside me. Another car almost clipped my bumper. My heart was slamming against my ribs. I tried the brakes again. Still nothing. And that's when it hit me like a gunshot in my brain. My brakes didn't fail. They were sabotaged, and I knew exactly who wanted me dead. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep the steering wheel steady. The car ahead was still slowing, I was still flying, and my brake pedal felt like it was connected to nothing. I did the only thing I could think of. I pumped the brakes over and over like my dad taught me when I was a kid. Still nothing. The car was drifting slightly. The winter wind pushed against it like it wanted me dead too. I spotted the emergency lane on the right, a thin strip of asphalt with a metal guardrail. If I could get there, maybe I could scrape the car down, slow it, survive. I yanked the wheel right, Tires screamed. The car swerved, fishtailed, and I almost lost control completely. But I made it into the emergency lane. I aimed straight at the guardrail and prayed. The passenger side slammed into metal. Sparks exploded. The screeching sound was violent, ripping through my skull. The guardrail scraped the car for what felt like forever, shredding metal, throwing my body around like a rag doll. Finally, the car slowed enough for me to stop. When everything went silent, I sat there, frozen, breathing like I'd just been pulled out of deep water. Then pain hit. My shoulder, my ribs, my forehead. Blood dripped down my eyebrow and into my eye. I fumbled for my phone and hit 911 with trembling fingers. "My brakes failed," I gasped. "I'm on I-74 near mile marker 112. Please hurry." Within minutes, flashing lights flooded the highway. An EMT checked me, bandaged my head, asked my name, asked if I'd been drinking. I kept repeating one sentence. "My brakes didn't work." A state trooper stood near my shredded car, shining a light under the hood. He frowned. Then he said something that made my stomach drop even lower. "Sir, this doesn't look like normal brake failure." I swallowed. "What does it look like?" He pointed. "Brake line's been cut." My blood turned to ice. Cut. Not leaked. Not worn out. Cut. In that moment, the truth was no longer a fear. It was a fact. Someone tried to kill me, and the only person who wanted me gone was Richard. When I got home later that night, after the hospital, after paperwork, after the shock wore into numbness, Richard was waiting. He stepped outside as soon as my mom's car pulled into the driveway. His face was full of fake concern. "Oh my God, Ethan, are you okay?" Mom rushed to me, crying, but Richard's eyes weren't on my bruises. They were on my face, studying, measuring, like he was checking if his plan had failed. I stared at him and said quietly, "The trooper said my brake line was cut." Richard blinked once. Then he smiled like I'd told a joke. "Cut," he repeated. "That's crazy, probably road debris." My mom looked between us. Richard grabbed her shoulders. "Evelyn, stop overthinking. Accidents happen. The boy's fine." But his hand was tight on her like a leash. That night, I didn't sleep. I stayed awake with my phone in my hand, staring at the pictures I took of the trust. And I made a decision. I wasn't leaving town. Not yet. Because if Richard wanted me dead, then I needed to find out exactly what he was hiding. And I needed proof strong enough to bury him. The next morning, Richard acted like nothing happened. He drank coffee, watched the news, joked about politics like the world was normal. But I watched him like a hawk. Every time he left the room, I checked my phone. Every time Mom flinched, I noticed. She wasn't just scared, she was trapped. Around noon, Richard said he needed to run errands and left in his truck. As soon as his taillights disappeared, Mom grabbed my arm. "Ethan, we need to talk," she whispered. I led her into the laundry room again. She looked like she might collapse. Her voice shook. "He did something after your father died. Something terrible." I stared at her. "What?" Mom's eyes filled with tears. "I overheard him arguing with someone a few years ago. He said your father was never supposed to leave the trust set up that way." My throat tightened. "Mom?" She nodded, crying now. "Ethan, he's been waiting. He's been planning. He keeps records of everything in that office. I've seen lists, dates, notes. Like a plan. Like a timeline." Then she whispered, "Last week, I found a voicemail saved on his laptop." My skin prickled. "A voicemail?" "Yes, it was old, but it was your father's voice." My heart stopped. "My dad's voice?" Mom nodded. "Your father sounded scared, like he was warning someone. Paused it when he heard me. He said it was nothing." My hands clenched. A voicemail from my father right before he died? That wasn't just suspicious, that was a bomb. "We need it," I said. Mom hesitated. "If he finds out—" "I already almost died," I snapped, then softened. "Mom, I need the truth." That night, while Richard was asleep, I went back into the office. This time I wasn't just looking for money, I was looking for my father's last words. I opened the safe and checked the folders again. Then I moved to the laptop. It was password protected. I tried the easiest guess. Richard's birthday. Denied. I tried Mom's. Denied. My pulse raced. Then I remembered something. Richard loved control and ego. I typed, Hayes 123. The screen unlocked. I almost laughed from shock. I searched the files. Dozens of folders. Trust, insurance, property, legal. Then I found one labeled audio. I clicked it, and there it was, a file named Michael Voicemail 2011. My hands shook as I hit play. My father's voice filled the room. Evelyn, it's Michael. Listen to me. If something happens to me, it wasn't a heart attack. I stopped breathing. Dad continued, voice strained. Richard then pushing me to change the trust. He thinks I don't notice what he's doing, but I do. I felt like the floor tilted under me. My father whispered, I put the trust in Ethan's name for a reason. Richard can't touch it, and that makes him dangerous. Then my father said the sentence that broke my soul. He threatened me. He said accidents happen. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. The voicemail ended. I stood there shaking. That was it, the missing piece. My father knew Richard would try something, and he left proof. I didn't know what to feel first, grief, rage, fear. Then I heard footsteps outside the door, slow, heavy, coming closer, and Richard's voice, low and amused. You still awake, Ethan? I closed the laptop instantly, like that could erase what I'd just heard. My heart slammed against my ribs. The office doorknob turned. Once, twice. Then the key slid in. Richard had his own key. Of course he did. The lock clicked and the door opened. Richard stood there in the doorway in the dark, wearing his robe like a king in a castle. He looked at me, then looked at the laptop, then looked at the safe. He smiled slowly. Well, he said, look at that. My mouth went dry. I couldn't sleep. Richard walked in and closed the door behind him. The click of the latch sounded like a prison cell shutting. You know, he said casually, I always wondered when you'd get curious. I tried to stay calm. Curious about what? Richard's smile widened. The trust. Silence. My skin crawled. He continued, Your father was a stubborn man, thought he was smarter than everyone, thought he could protect you. Richard stepped closer until his face was inches from mine. He was wrong. I swallowed. You cut my brake line. Richard didn't deny it. He simply tilted his head like I'd asked something childish. I tried to save this family, he said softly. I tried to keep Evelyn stable, keep the house stable. That money should have been mine. I earned it. You earned it? I whispered, disgusted. Richard's eyes darkened. I was the one running things when your dad got sick. I was the one making deals. He'd still be alive if he listened to me. I felt my hands shaking with rage. My dad warned Mom, I said. There's a voicemail. I heard it. For the first time, Richard's expression twitched. Not fear, anger. Did you? He asked quietly. I forced my voice steady. Yes, and I saved it. That was a lie, but I needed it to be a weapon. Richard stared at me for a long time. Then he said, You know what the funniest part is? He leaned in. You think you're the hero. Then he stepped back and smiled again. But you're just in the way. Richard walked to the desk drawer and opened it. I saw the metal flash of a handgun. My blood froze. He didn't raise it yet, just held it like a reminder. You leave tomorrow. You forget what you saw, and you never come back. And if I don't? I asked. Richard's eyes went flat. Then your next accident won't fail. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just greed. Richard had crossed into something deeper. He wasn't trying to win money. He was trying to erase a witness. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Mom. "Where are you? Please answer." Richard noticed. His gaze dropped to my pocket. "Give me your phone," he said. I took a slow breath. Then I did the only thing I could. I lunged. Not at Richard, at the office lamp on his desk. I grabbed it and swung it hard into his wrist. The gun flew out of his hand and hit the floor. Richard roared in shock, grabbing his arm. I shoved him back and ran for the door. He slammed into me from behind, heavy and furious. We crashed into the wall. My vision blurred. He grabbed my collar and hissed, "You should have died on that highway." I didn't answer. I headbutted him, hard. Richard stumbled. I ripped the door open and sprinted down the hall. "Evelyn!" Richard screamed. "Stop him!" I burst into my room, grabbed my keys, my phone, and ran outside. My lungs burned. My car started instantly. As I peeled out of the driveway, I saw Mom on the porch in her robe. She wasn't stopping me. She was watching me go like she knew if I stayed one more night, I wouldn't leave alive.
I drove straight to the police station. Not the one in town, not where Richard had friends. I drove to the county sheriff's office 40 minutes away. My hands were still shaking when I walked in. A deputy behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" "I need to report attempted murder," I said. He blinked. "Sir?" I told them everything. The brake line, the trust, the safe, the voicemail, the gun. At first, they looked skeptical. Then I showed them the photos from Part 2, the trust paperwork, the forged signature, the claim forms. A detective was called in, Detective Alvarez. She sat across from me and listened without interrupting once. When I finished, she said calmly, "You did the right thing coming here." I swallowed. "You believe me?" Alvarez nodded. Brake lines don't cut themselves, and if there's a trust involved, that's motive. Then she asked the question that changed everything. "Do you have the voicemail?" My stomach dropped. I had left the laptop. I never saved the file. I heard it, I said, but I didn't download it. Alvarez held my gaze. "Then we get it." That night she made calls. By morning a warrant was being prepared, not just for the office, but for Richard's entire property. I was put in a motel under sheriff protection. And then I got a call that made my blood run cold. Mom. Her voice was shaking. "Ethan, he knows you went to the police." "Mom, get out," I said urgently. "Leave the house." "I can't," she whispered. "He locked the doors. He took my phone last night. I'm calling from the landline." My stomach twisted. Then she said something that terrified me more than the gun ever did. "He's packing." "He's leaving?" I asked. "No," Mom whispered. "He's preparing." A pause. Then she whispered the words that made my heart stop. "He said if he can't have the trust, nobody will." The sheriff moved fast. Detective Alvarez didn't waste time. 2 unmarked cars and a patrol vehicle headed straight toward my mom's house. I rode with Alvarez, heart pounding so hard it hurt. As we turned onto my childhood street, I saw Richard's truck in the driveway. Alvarez lifted her radio. "Units in position." My mouth went dry. "Please let my mom be okay." We pulled up quietly. Then Alvarez raised her hand, and suddenly the street came alive with flashing lights. "Sheriff's office!" The front door didn't open. "Open the door!" No answer. Then we heard it. A muffled scream from inside. My mom. I ran forward, but Alvarez grabbed my arm. "Stay behind us!" The deputy kicked the door in. The sound echoed through the entire neighborhood. We rushed inside. The house was chaos, drawers pulled out, papers everywhere, and in the living room, Richard was standing with my mother pressed against his chest. His arm was around her neck, and in his hand was that same gun. I felt like I was going to vomit. Richard's eyes locked onto mine. He smiled. "Look who brought the cavalry," he said. Alvarez raised her weapon. "Richard Hayes, drop the gun." Richard tightened his arm around Mom. Mom's face was red, her eyes pleading. Richard yelled, "Back up! Back up!" Alvarez kept her voice calm. "Let her go. This ends peacefully." Richard laughed like she'd told a joke. "Peacefully?" he said. "I gave this family everything. I protected it, and now this little rat wants to steal what's mine?" I shouted, "You tried to kill me!" Richard's eyes flashed. "Because you wouldn't stay in your place." Then, in a moment that felt unreal, he screamed, "Michael was weak." My chest went tight. Richard yelled, "He wouldn't sign. He wouldn't change the trust. He thought he could stop me." Mom gasped. Richard kept ranting, eyes wild now. I offered him a way out. I offered him an easy death, but no, he wanted to be noble. Alvarez's eyes sharpened. "Richard, what did you do to Michael Carter?" Richard realized what he'd said too late. His smile vanished. "It doesn't matter. He's dead, and Ethan's next." He lifted the gun. Everything slowed. A deputy fired. One shot. Richard's body jerked. The gun dropped. Mom fell to her knees, coughing. Free. Richard hit the floor, bleeding, eyes wide in shock, like he couldn't believe consequences were real. I ran to Mom and held her. She sobbed into my shoulder. Alvarez stepped over Richard and said coldly, "You're under arrest." Richard coughed, blood in his teeth, and whispered, "You'll never get it back. Never." Richard survived. Barely. But now he was in a hospital bed with cuffs on his wrists and 2 deputies outside his door, and he couldn't lie his way out of paperwork. The warrant search found everything. The trust documents, the forged signatures, insurance fraud evidence, bank transfers from the trust accounts, and the biggest bomb of all, a folder labeled Michael. Inside were printed emails between Richard and a shady mechanic shop. The subject line made Detective Alvarez's face go hard. "Brake line service, no questions asked." But it wasn't my car. It was dated 2011, the same year my father died. I read the rest with shaking hands. Richard had sabotaged my father's truck years ago, not to kill him instantly, but to cause stress, fear, panic, to push him into a heart attack. Then he stepped in as the hero for my mother. Then he married her. Then he waited for the trust transfer date. 11 years of planning, 11 years of control, and 1 month after my 31st birthday, he tried to erase the last obstacle, me. Mom cried when she saw the evidence, not because Richard hurt her, but because she finally understood she'd been living with her husband's murderer. I slept next to him. I raised you with him in this house. I held her hand. "You didn't know, Mom." Detective Alvarez said, "Now we make sure he pays." Richard was charged with attempted murder, kidnapping, insurance fraud, forgery, financial exploitation, and then the DA added the charge that made the courtroom silent. Murder investigation reopened for Michael Carter, for my father. The trial lasted months. Richard's lawyer tried everything. They called me a greedy son. They called my mom confused. They called the voicemail unreliable. But the evidence didn't care about their excuses. Brake line sabotage records,
bank transfers, forged signatures, the trust paperwork, and my father's voicemail played in court. When his voice filled the room, I saw Richard's face change. Not regret, not sadness, just hatred. Like he hated my father for refusing to be owned. The jury didn't take long. Guilty on all major charges. When the judge read Richard's sentence, Mom squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. Richard turned and stared at me. He whispered something I couldn't hear, but I didn't need to. I knew what he was thinking. He still believed I didn't deserve it. But that was the thing. This wasn't about deserving. This was about truth. The Carter Trust was restored. Every stolen dollar was traced, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt like my father's legacy was safe. Mom sold the house. We didn't keep the walls that held that evil. We moved closer to Chicago, a fresh start. I bought a small condo with a skyline view, not to show off, but to remind myself I survived. Some nights I still wake up hearing tires scream against metal. But now I don't wake up scared. I wake up grateful, because I learned something my father tried to teach me long before he died. Monsters don't always look like monsters. Sometimes they show up with groceries, and they call themselves family.